Hello, everyone. Welcome to Remote Learning Week 2. This is Lesson 1, Factors that Affect Traits. Before we get started, we're going to do our mindful minute. So I encourage you guys, wherever you are, to sit with a mindful body. You can pause the video if you need a moment to do that. And you can either watch the animation or you can close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. And we'll take deep breaths in and out through our nose for 1 minute. Go ahead and get ready. And together, inhale through our nose. Exhale. Nice deep breath in. Inhale. And exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Halfway there. Inhale fresh oxygen. Exhale the carbon dioxide. Inhale. Exhale, release stress and tension. Last one. Deep breath in. And exhale, pushing out any stress and tension. Allow your breathing to return to normal. And check in with yourself. How do you feel? Notice if anything has changed. And when you're ready, you can slowly blink open your eyes. So welcome back, everyone. Today's learning targets. Remember that this icon in the top right means that we have to be writing. Is I can explain how mutations and the environment can affect traits. So here are some pictures. The one on the left is a mutation. The one over here is showing how the environment can affect traits. And traits are what give us our proteins and cause a lot of our visible traits. So the structures that we see, that can be skin color, eye color, hair color, even the way your bone structure is shaped. Those are all traits. Pause the video now so that you can write this down. So here's a little visual to recap what we learned last week. A gene, which is a segment of DNA, will go through a process called transcription, and in which it is turned into RNA. RNA gets translated into a protein, and then that protein is what produces the traits. So, for example, the way a flower looks, color of the flower, etc. Now, taking a look at these three pictures, we got Spider-Man on the left, Ninja Turtles, and an X-Men. What do these all have in common? And a fun question is, what superpower would you want to have? So, what do these all have in common? Well, if you've seen any of these movies, these characters have quote unquote mutations, which is causing them to have their superpowers, right? Spider Man was bitten by a radioactive spider. Then turtles were in the sewer and they had radiation, radioactive chemicals pour on them. And then X-Men are considered mutants. So, what superpower would you want to have? For me, I think I would have time travel as a superpower. So I could travel into the past, travel into the future, maybe something like that. You guys want to let me know what superpower you would want to have? You can comment on your assignments to let me know. So, we're going to talk about mutations today and what they are. Some mutations are really common, like freckles are actually a mutation. Some of them could be dimples. If you have dimples, that's considered a mutation. Or albinism, which is the lack of production of melanin in the skin. Some of them are more fun, like having two different color eyes. I actually do know one person that has a blue eye and a brown eye. And like this cat is two colors. And some of them are more serious as well. So some mutations can actually cause diseases, one of them being cystic fibrosis, where your airways in your lungs get clogged with mucus, and that causes really difficult breathing for some people who have cystic fibrosis. So what are mutations? How do we get them? Where do they come from? And what are their impacts? Remember, this icon in the top right is that you have a check for understanding question that goes with the video. So I'll play the video now. You can watch it all the way through and then answer the questions, or you can watch it and pause and answer the questions as you go. So those are going to be your questions over here.
Ever since I was a kid, I have been curious about mutations. I think certain movies may have had an impact. I used to imagine mutations with amazing abilities, but there was also a lot I didn't understand about mutations. Let me explain. Many people understand that a mutation is a change of genetic material, more specifically, a change within a nucleic acid. RNA and DNA are both types of nucleic acids. Therefore, anything with RNA or DNA can have a mutation. That means animals, and that definitely includes humans, also plants, fungi, protists, bacteria, archaea, they can all have mutations. Additionally, so can viruses. Many mutations can be neutral in effect. You can see this codon codes for the amino acid leucine. But if it experiences this particular silent mutation, even though a base has been altered, it still codes for leucine. It did not change the amino acid. Mutations can also be harmful or helpful, but it's important to understand that mutations are random. The organism can't will itself to get a certain mutation. You can learn more about this in our natural selection video, where we talk about how a bacterium may already possess a helpful mutation that allows it to survive an antibiotic. But the bacterium didn't will itself to mutate to develop this certain mutation. Okay, so again, mutations are random, but there can be factors that make mutations more likely to occur. External factors like certain types of chemicals or excessive radiation, or internal factors like an event that causes a problem during DNA replication in interphase. During interphase, cells can replicate DNA before they divide. So let's discuss some different types of mutations. We'll start with gene mutations. DNA makes up genes, and genes can code for proteins that influence different traits. So when a mutation in DNA happens, which specifically means a change in one or more DNA bases, then different proteins can be produced, which can affect an organism's traits. In this example, we have fruit fly DNA. Mutations could include substitution, which means the wrong base is matched, insertion, which means an extra base or bases are added in. There is also deletion, which means a base is removed. Insertions and deletions have the potential to be especially dangerous. Why? Remember in protein synthesis how we talked about how bases are read in threes? Well, if you add a base or remove a base, suddenly the number of bases total has changed. And if you read the bases in threes, depending on where it happened, everything that is read afterwards could be affected. We call this a frame shift mutation. If you look at this frame shift example here, where a single base has been inserted, you can see how the following codons, which have three bases each, are now all affected as the reading frame has been shifted. This example shows how it can lead to many amino acid changes.
All right, so now we're going to look at a specific mutation that causes a disease called sickle cell anemia.
Substitution in the case of sickle cell anemia. First, a little background. Hemoglobin is a protein in your red blood cells that helps you carry oxygen. But in the disorder sickle cell anemia, the gene that codes for hemoglobin is mutated. If you inherit two copies of this gene, one from each parent, you can have this disorder. This disorder can make it difficult for your red blood cells to carry oxygen. because the shape of the red blood cell is affected from this mutated hemoglobin protein. This can lead to anemia and other problems. While unfortunately there is not a cure for this disorder yet, the good news is that treatment for this disorder has greatly improved. Another thing to mention, if an individual only inherits one copy of the mutated gene from one parent, they are a carrier, but they don't officially have the disease. Usually they do not have symptoms, but those that are carriers appear to have a protective factor against malaria. Malaria is a disease caused by a protist that can be transmitted by mosquitoes. These individuals can still get malaria, but their symptoms are often less severe. We should mention that studying mutations and genetic disorders is a large and important field right now. Genetic counselors work to help families that may be affected by genetic disorders. If you have an interest in learning more about careers related to this topic, please check out some of our further reading suggestions in the description below. Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind.
Okay, so a mutation is a change or mistake in a base of the DNA sequence. This can happen randomly or can be caused by external factors like UV light radiation or chemicals. Pause the video now to write down this definition. So in the video, they explain different types of mutations. Those were substitution, insertion, and deletion. We're going to look at an example right now, and the sentence that we're going to look at is the boy ate his hot dog and cut his lip. I know, it's super weird and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But the sentence, if you notice the words, they are divided into 3 letters each. Why would they be 3 letters each? It resembles a codon, which is 3 letters in the DNA sequence. So let's look at a mutation in this sentence. Here's our regular, here's our mutation. What do you notice? If you look, there's an R in this letter, in this word, instead of an H. This is what happens to DNA in mutations. A letter is either changed, taken out, or an extra letter is put in, and this affects the job or function of the DNA. The example in the video was talking about sickle cell anemia. Now over here on the left is a non-mutated regular DNA sequence for sickle cell anemia, and on the right is the mutated sequence. What do you notice? There's a substitution mutation. CTC, the T is substituted to an A. What impact does that have on the mRNA and the resulting hemoglobin protein? Well, when the DNA is transcribed into mRNA, there's going to be a change there. Now our mRNA sequence, instead of GAG, is GUG. Then when the mRNA is translated into the protein, we actually get a different protein. Normally the protein would be GLU. Now, because of this mutation, the protein is VAL. And just that small change inside of the DNA, one letter change, actually causes this disease called sickle cell anemia. And this VAL amino acid in the protein causes hemoglobin to be a different shape, causing the red blood cells to be this sickle shape. So over here is your normal red blood cell shape. Over here is your sickle cell shape. Summarizing the key points, a mutation changes the DNA sequence, and that changes the amino acid that's produced. Because the amino acid is different, that could change the shape of the protein, causing the protein not to work, like we saw in the example of sickle cell anemia and the protein hemoglobin. Pause the video now so that you can write down these key points. Now, earlier we mentioned that DNA can be mutated by excessive radiation. So UV radiation from the sun can actually cause a mutation in our skin. This can lead to what's called skin cancer. So too much exposure to the sun without wearing sunscreen can cause, in some people, the mutation of the skin cells overgrowing and turning into skin cancer. A challenge question in your check for understanding is, can a mutation that occurs in a body cell, such as skin cancer, be passed on to offspring? So if a person has skin cancer and then they have children, will their children have skin cancer? Why or why not? The second part of our learning target today is how the environment can affect traits. So we just looked at mutations, how they affect traits. Now, how can the environment actually do that too? We're going to watch a video on gene expression. Now, that means how is your gene showing up and affecting your traits?
Hi, it's Mr. Anderson. Welcome to Biology Essentials Video 53. This is on environmental genotype effects. In other words, how the environment can affect genotypes. Now, remember, genotypes are the genes that you have, but how those are expressed is called your phenotype. So what you physically look like is your phenotype, but the genotype are the genes that lie behind that. In other words, that make those proteins that make your physical appearance. And so basically, as the environment changes, you can either express genes or not. And so this is a Himalayan rabbit, or at least a cartoon version of a Himalayan rabbit. Himalayan rabbits are all black. But if you look at the picture, it's not all black. And so basically what a Himalayan rabbit's doing is it's expressing a gene to make melanin, which causes the coloration that's black. However, since the core of the body of the Himalayan rabbit is warm, it disrupts the expression of that genotype, so you can't make the melanin. And so the areas on a Himalayan rabbit that are cooler, that are away from that core, are actually able to be that black phenotype. And so you might not buy it. And so this is a cool study that was done with Himalayan rabbits. Basically, you shave the Himalayan rabbit's back, so you get rid of all the fur on the back. And then you add, not ice, but an ice pack to the back of a Himalayan rabbit. And then you let it sit on there as the hair grows back in. And when the hair grows back in, what you'll have is a black patch wherever you shaved. And so what happened was, by adding that ice pack, you were able to cool the temperature down. And so the core of the body is not able to heat it up, and you can make the melanin that would naturally be there. And so basically, you can regulate whether or not that genotype is going to be expressed.
So in this example, the genotype of the black fur is expressed depending on temperature.
You have. So let's start with the animal side and seasonal melanin. So this is an Arctic fox, but so is this. And so basically an Arctic fox will change its color due to the season, which totally makes sense. In the winter, when it's snow everywhere, you want them to be white so you can blend in for camouflage, and then in the summer you also want to blend in with your environment. So how do they do that? Well, basically they have a pineal gland. The pineal gland sits kind of right in the core of the brain. It's right behind the eyes, and basically it secretes melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone that's created during times of darkness. And so during the winter, they're going to secrete more melatonin. As they secrete that melatonin, it's going to trigger the cells in the body not to produce melanin, and so they're going to have this white appearance. Now, when summer comes, we're going to have a decrease in melatonin, they're going to increase the amount of melanin, and they're going to have a dark appearance. And so that's evolved over time, responding to the environment. Those that were able to turn off that melanin during the winter were able to survive longer. And so we're going to see that in the Arctic fox, but also the Arctic hare, as they change the amount of melanin that they have. And so we're either expressing that gene and having the dark color, or we're not expressing the gene. We could also see that same thing in plants. And if you think about plants, you might say, well, they're always green. And that's the photosynthetic part. So the leaves obviously are always going to be a green color. That's based on the amount of chlorophyll. But the function of a flower is to attract an animal, notably the insects. And so basically, this is the same hydrangea, it's the same species of plant, but it's able to get different colors of flowers. And it's doing that in response to the environment, notably the soil environment. And so basically, these ones are cultivated by humans, but they can vary the pH of the soil. And if you have a pH in the sixes, then you get this pink hydrangea. If you lower the pH into the fives, you can get this blue hydrangea. Basically, the blue is coming from aluminum that when the pH gets lower, they're able to pick up and then express that. And so the genes that they're making are dependent upon what building blocks they have, in this case, in their environment, whether they can express it or not. So it's not like they're turning it on or off, but they're able to vary the amount of coloration. And so that's going to give them variation in their environment. Last thing I wanted.
All right, so we saw how animals have their traits expressed based on the amount of sunlight during the time of the year, and how some plants can have their traits expressed based on the pH or the acidity of the soil. So, those are some examples of how the environment can affect the expression of traits. Here's a Regents question. Now, the photographs below are side by side images of twins A and B with identical genetic information. Twin A is a non smoker, while twin B is a lifetime smoker. Okay, so what do we know here? We know that twins have identical genetic information, which means they have identical DNA. If you look at pictures A and B, the twins look pretty different. Like it looks like they're related, but they don't look identical for sure. Now, smoking, we know, causes a lot of health problems. So, which of these would best describe why the twins look different? 1, twin B is older than twin A. 2, they each inherited half of their DNA from each parent. 3, the expression of genes is influenced by the environment. Or 4, one twin resembles mother and the other resembles father. Take a moment to answer in your head. We know that 1 is definitely not true. We know that when you are born, you inherit DNA from each parent. So that might be true. We know that the expressions of genes is influenced by the environment. So which of these do we know is definitely not true? Well, 1 can't be true because they're twins, so that makes no sense. This one doesn't make sense either because it's saying they're identical twins, so they must look the same. So we're left between 2 and 3. They each inherit half of their DNA from each parent, and the expression of genes is influenced by the environment. Because they're identical twins, their DNA is going to be identical to each other. So regardless of getting half from each parent, that doesn't really make a difference in this situation. The expression of genes is influenced by the environment. What is the factor in the environment that's causing them to have a different expression of genes? It's because 1 was a smoker and 1 was not, causing the twins to actually look different. All right, so that's it for our lesson today. Next, you're going to finish your check for understandings if you haven't, and then you're going to move on to the week 1 assignment. Make sure you're filling in the blue boxes. That's where all your answers need to go. See you guys later.